what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, October 6th, 2017, end of the week. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And, of course, Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. Quick program note, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 with her unique perspective on the world. So let's get right on into it. People are still going back and forth about the horrific shooting in Las Vegas last Sunday night. And it's interesting that more and more people are starting to come on over to this idea that, in point of fact, Stephen Paddock did not act alone. Apparently, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer is saying that even though the official position of the FBI remains crazed, lone nut, raging white male, that many people within the FBI are also saying that, yes, there had to be more than one person involved with all the guns involved and everything. So there's the official story, and then there's reality here. And a lot of people are still out there saying, this is looking like a false flag, including Paul Craig Roberts. So this has definitely, as false flag staged events going, it's not going very well at all. In fact, it's stumbled rather badly. And mostly that's because the American people have become very skeptical of what the government and the corporate media is saying. For a very, very simple reason. We have been lied to so many times. The prudent assumption at this point is the government's going to go online. We know they've lied in the past. They lied about Saddam's nuclear weapons. They lied about Assad's sarin gas. They lied about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. They lied about Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. You tell me when they stopped lying. And no, they never have, because lying gets them what they want. Your kids on the front line of their wars. Now, there's an article over in aimfortruth.org where they're talking about analyzing the Mandalay Massacre false flag, and they're going down all the historical indicators that we've seen in false flags before, like Sandy Hook and the Boston Marathon bombing, and saying, yeah, all the indicators are here. There are all these incongruities, all of these signs of perception management. They're all there. This is another staged incident to push that gun grabber agenda. Now, I'm getting a lot of emails from people who are saying that anytime they put up a post questioning the official narrative on Las Vegas, it's being taken down at Facebook. Now, remember what we said. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and that's what's going on right now. Because anybody putting on up a story questioning the official narrative, it disappears from Facebook and from all the other social media, Twitter. They're all fully on board of trying to maintain this illusion that this was a crazed, lone nut, raging white male that had all those guns up in that hotel room. And apparently YouTube has yet again revised their search results following outrage over the Las Vegas shooting conspiracy videos. Oh my goodness, we're outraged over all these videos questioning the official results. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting that YouTube is modifying their algorithms to block conspiracy theories and so-called fake news videos from making it to the top of the search results. In other words, anything that questions the official story is now being blocked by YouTube. Sig Heil, Sig Heil. YouTube, YouTube, Uber, Alice, boom, boom, boom. That's where we are right now. It's pure 1984. You will only see what the government wants you to see. You will not ask questions. You will not doubt. You will not think for yourself. If you think, you must be working with the Russians. Interviews with the hotel staff are saying that Paddock could have been stopped. That it doesn't make sense he got up to that room high up in the hotel with all those guns. And meanwhile, of course, the corporate media is blaming the independent media for all this propaganda, all this wacko conspiracy, tinfoil hat, kook nonsense. How could you even think of questioning the government's view of anything? Well, only because the government and the corporate media have lied to us so many times. Everybody out there saying that Stephen Paddock acted alone, he's a crazed, lone nut, angry white male. These are the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. Why should we be listening? And by the way, if you were paying attention earlier in the day, the web server for whatreallyhappened.com, we got slammed with a major denial of service attack. We were down for almost 2 hours. And that tells us that the evil ones are just scared out of their minds that the American public aren't buying this latest hoax. They've gone back to this well one too many times. Every time they do another one of these staged incidents and more people see the problems with them, more and more people doubt, there comes a point where trying to pull another one becomes counterproductive, and they've hit that. They've absolutely hit that. Now, a lot of people are saying, how could this guy have gotten all these guns? Now, we only have the U.S. government's word that he owned all these guns, and we know how easy it is to fake computerized paperwork. The reality is, if he had bought this much cold medicine instead of guns, he would have been flagged as a potential meth manufacturer. And again, I'm having a very hard time believing that the BATF doesn't in fact have a system that flags people who are buying too many guns. You buy too much cold medication, man, you're going to jail. Makes it kind of hard to believe that this guy bought all these guns. I don't think he did. Those guns were treated like they're props on a movie set. They weren't treated as possessions of somebody who's a gun enthusiast. It just doesn't make really any sense. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network, and we're going to take a phone call from Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on with this thing, but one thing about it is his girlfriend, the Filipina.
Mm-hmm.
Now she flew home to the Philippines, and then she came back just to talk to the FBI, right?
Yeah,
I guess.
that's the story.
Well, she, for one thing, the guy sent her $100,000. That's what happens. I mean, it's not unusual to send money to a girl in the Philippines. I've even done that. You know, not $100,000, but I mean, when they latch onto some rich American like this guy, then they take care of their whole family and not just the mother, but all the cousins and everybody else. But
yeah, well, Stephen Paddock was a multimillionaire. To him, $100,000 is just pocket change.
Right, it was nothing. It was a small. It was just he was helping out his friend. Everybody does that.
Mm-hmm.
She came back. Now they grilled her. That one day they grilled her for 2 or 3 hours, and
mm-hmm.
she basically had nothing to say except she loved him and wanted to live a good life. And so they called her back in for some more grilling. You know,
mm-hmm.
They're grilling her like crazy. They did this to they do this to females especially because
mm-hmm.
They did this to Marina Oswald.
Yes.
They did it to the girl in the Robert Kennedy assassination that saw the girl with the polka dot dress. They drilled her.
Susan Serrano. Yes.
Yeah, they grilled her forever, and then finally she just said, "Okay, say whatever you want. I don't care." I mean, you know, she just wanted to get the hell away from him. You know, but this girl, she still didn't have anything to say. What the comment I read was, sometimes he laid in bed, moaning and saying, "Oh my God!" Well, maybe he was having sex at the time. Maybe that's what it did.
Could very well be, and we know the FBI likes to coerce testimony, and sometimes it can get out of control. Remember that guy down in Florida? They were trying to get him to link the Tsarnaev brothers to some murder, and he kept refusing, and it wound up with the FBI just killing this guy, shooting him right in the top of the skull, execution style. You know, and they claimed that they claimed that he attacked them, but he had a bum knee at the time.
In the first place, the FBI doesn't belong in this case. It was a murder without anybody crossing state lines.
That's true.
They're there, I don't know exactly, by invitation or just because they stuck their nose into it.
They stuck their nose into it. They stuck their nose into it. But you're absolutely right. Nobody crossed the state line here. Stephen Paddock lived just an hour from Las Vegas. The FBI doesn't actually have jurisdiction there. The Mandalay Hotel is not a federal building. Frankly, the Las Vegas Police Department ought to have kicked him out.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let you go then, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. You know, this Filipino girl who went back to the Philippines raises an interesting question because apparently there was some female seen with Stephen Paddock in the days before the shooting happened. And before they destroyed the records of his stay at the hotel, it came on out that he had been ordering room service for two. Now, who was this other woman? I'm rather curious. Was she a hooker? I mean, certainly enough of those in Las Vegas here. Was she somebody who approached Stephen Paddock? Was it her or potentially his job to keep Stephen Paddock down on the floor of the casino, gambling away? And maybe the timeline for what's going on in his room was that he was lured down to the casino floor by this second person. They were having some fun. He got tired, decided to go back up early, and walked in on the perpetrators setting up the sniper's nest, and that's why he got killed. But there's an open issue there that we definitely need to look at. Meanwhile, gun stores are reporting a rush on guns in general, and definitely on the bump stocks. They're selling for premium prices here right now because everybody is anticipating that there's going to be a ban on them. The news is saying that Trump may just ban the bump stocks. And I'm rethinking my position on this in the light of the call I got yesterday. Again, I was allowing my own personal bias to single-shot muzzle loaders and the fact that a bump stock is not something I would ever personally be interested in. But if you go back to the original purpose of that Second Amendment, which is to hold an oppressive government at bay, then bump stocks are something that the American people should have access to. And so I'm reversing my position. I'm not in support of a ban on bump stocks. Again, a ban is not going to keep the criminals from getting them. They can make them, they can find them, you can 3D print them. It's not all that difficult. And I think for those who really do think there's a civil war coming in this country, and I'm afraid that there is, I don't want to see it, I'm trying to prevent it, but it does look like it's on its way, then an armed populace becomes essential at this point. Getting on to the domestic politics, kind of an interesting story here. The Aiea brothers are now having their day in court, their day in investigation, and they're starting to blow the whistle on Congress because they've got all the inside dirt. They had access to all the computers. And the Aiea brothers are now blowing the whistle, saying that House Democrats ordered the systematic falsification of records showing how they spend their taxpayer-provided office budgets, according to lawyers for the Aiea brothers. And it's a remarkable accusation that pits these sitting lawmakers against the former aides, Imran Awan and his brother Abid and Jamal, and his wife Hina Alvi. Now, Imran was arrested in July while trying to board a flight to Pakistan and then indicted on 4 counts of bank fraud involving moving money to that country. Imran and Hina, who are also indicted, face a court date on Friday. Now, one of Imran's lawyers, Aaron Page, acknowledged the invoicing discrepancy August 21st, telling the Daily Caller Foundation, this is just how things have been done forever. This is what experienced members of Congress expect to expedite things. They adjust the pricing. And nobody really knows where that taxpayer money is actually going. It's just considered, this is just how things are done. You get this money, you spend it where you want to spend it, strippers, bars, who knows what, and you put it in the ledger as excessive amounts of typing paper or something like that. Now, Chelsea Clinton apparently is in court right now. She's trying to get a judge to throw out a $150,000 lawsuit against her recently published children's book, feminist children's book, She Persisted, because apparently a writer is claiming that she basically ripped it off from him. And, you know, Chelsea's had the book out for 17 weeks. It's doing a little better than her mother's book, What Happened. But Christopher James Kimberly claims the former first daughter used 3 of the same women featured in his work, and her publisher riffed off the book's idea after he sent over the proposal through a Facebook message. Well, Chelsea is definitely her mother's daughter here. And no, you don't send ideas to publishers over Facebook. you have to protect your idea, copyright it, register it with the Writers Guild, and approach them through a representative or a lawyer. You put anything out on the computer, they can grab it. And idea theft is very common. I saw a lot of it in Hollywood. In fact, it even happened to me. And you're not going to find lawyers who are willing to take your lawsuits on contingency basis because the deck is stacked against the writers and in favor of the producers. There was a major victory by the science fiction writer Harlan Ellison. And if you're not familiar with him, he's very famous. If you remember the original Star Trek TV series, the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, where Kirk and Spock and McCoy go back to Depression-era America. That was written by Harlan Ellison. It was a tumultuous event in the production of the show here. Harlan Ellison submitted an idea to Columbia Pictures called Brillo. It was about a robot cop paired with a human cop. It was an experimental cop. The producer at Columbia who saw it then moved over to Paramount and had it rewritten and submitted it as his idea for a series called Future Cop, which actually got produced. And Harlan Ellison sued, and he mortgaged his house. His friends mortgaged their house, and he just fought this thing all the way through the court system, and he finally won. And it was considered a shockwave in Hollywood that a writer whose idea had been ripped off actually succeeded in suing a major studio for that. And when Harlan got the first check on the settlement, the very first thing he did was he bought a billboard right across from Paramount's main gate and put up an ad saying, you know, I beat them and so can you. And it did sort of rebalance things a little bit. But idea theft is a reality that any writer has to deal with. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hi.
Hey, Joan Collins was in The City Edge of Forever.
That's
and
right.
Was rated a lot of times as the best Star Trek episode by the fans lots of times, and it was a good episode.
It was a great episode. You know, along with Trouble with Tribbles was a great one. They got nominated for a Hugo Award. I actually have a Tribble here in the hallway that hit Bill Shatner right on the head.
Hey, Mike, is Chelsea Clinton's book as racist as Dr. Seuss's?
I have no idea. I have no intention of reading a feminist children's book because I'm not a child. And I was a feminist back in the days when feminism was about equal pay for equal work, equal access to credit and education. But once they started screaming that all of us ikipu males were nothing but rapists, I kind of had to sort of rethink that position.
Did you? I want to talk about the Sheen, but did you hear about? I think it was in one of the. I live in New Jersey, so I'm behind enemy lines. But I think it was in Massachusetts or something where they want to ban the Dr. Seuss in the museum. One of the characters on the wall is Chinese or something, so 3 of the librarians or whatever, liberals obviously.
Yes.
They wanted to ban that's just ridiculous, Mike.
It is ridiculous. If carried to its extreme, we're all going to be living in gray walled homes and offices. There's going to be nothing hanging on the wall. There'll be no books, no artwork, no magazines because it offends somebody. And again, it's part of the way they're trying to erase our cultural heritage to make us easier to control.
No, Karl Marx will be hanging on the walls. Hey, Mike, you realize you're right. Remember when you said yesterday with the bumpy stocks? I don't own a gun, and I might not. I'm not going to tell anybody nobody should tell anybody anything about if you own a gun or not.
I agree.
The bumpy stocks. Mike, if you take a step back with these people, I said it before with anything, they'll take 10 steps forward. You cannot give these people an inch at all. You have to move forward. Donald Trump should have moved forward from the beginning. He stayed either neutral or stepped back. When you do that, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. You can't step back with these people because they'll walk over you and they'll keep walking over you. And I hate to say it, Mike, but I said it the other day, but there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and I don't know where we're headed tomorrow or the next day, but this whole thing is getting crazy, Mike.
It is. It's crazy times. It's crazy times. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Dustin. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Good day, Michael. Nice to talk to you. If Donald Trump were to find a cure for cancer, he still wouldn't get these media rats, these Dema rats, or these Demo rats to do acknowledge that. I mean, this is how.
No, they'd be screaming he was putting the cancer doctors out of work.
Exactly, that's what they'd be screaming. You're right on, Michael. But listen, number one, I got three things. The thing with the shooter in Vegas, this guy was definitely a leftist. He was going to Starbucks all the time. They already talking about it. And they just said on the news right now, on breaking news, that this guy his estate was almost worth $4 million. That's the least that he's been worth. So this guy's worth $4 million to do this perpetrated evil. It's unbelievable. And I have to say, this guy's in a closet like a George Soros, who's a billionaire, doing the same thing in a different way. With this Black Lives Matter and all this crap that Soros was perpetrating on the world. But Michael, this guy, the smuggle that many weapons into the Mandalay Bay and all these cameras, they were turning them one eye blind. They weren't watching what this guy was doing, smuggling all that weaponry in there.
You know, or it was brought up in the staff elevator inside some kind of a large container that wouldn't stand out on the security cameras, or whoever was running security was compromised by the FBI or some other government agency. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's simply not plausible this guy could make all those trips up and down with all those weapons and not arouse the suspicions of the Mandalay Bay security, which they've got very good security there because of all that has gone on in that town previously. And as I said yesterday, I had a friend who was in Las Vegas when the shooting. They're trying to sell this idea that he had this secret life and he was buying all these guns. They can't find anybody who actually knew the guy, his family or friends, to corroborate any of this stuff.
That's true, Michael. Michael, one more thing that I know you other callers, but here's the main news that's on today. I don't know if you heard about it. This guy, Alberto Gutierrez, this congressman from Illinois, you want to hear the real news that should be talked about all day long, Michael, is this guy Gutierrez is basically telling the Republicans and the white Anglos in this country, you're going to accept the Hispanics here whether you like it or not. DACA or no DACA, you're going to get DACA shoved down your throat. And that's the real news in this news cycle, is this DACA, these dreamers, they're literally going to vote Democrat. They're changing the makeup of this country, and that's exactly what's happening here, Michael.
Yeah, well, we know that's why they opened the borders. We know that's why they opened the borders. Instant Democratic voters. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Donald Trump yesterday came on out saying it's the calm before the storm. This is while meeting senior military leaders. And a lot of people are very worried. What do you mean the calm before the storm? What storm are we talking about? Are we talking about North Korea? Are we talking about Syria? Are we talking about both? Are we talking about Russia and China? But we're seeing all this rhetoric that seems to indicate that far from pulling out of all these foreign entanglements, as Trump promised on the campaign trail, we are, in fact, plunging further in, heading to our self-immolation. So the president's use of that ominous phrase is basically people saying, what do you mean by that? And Trump said, you'll find out. Now, we know that Trump is going to decertify the Iran nuclear deal. There is no evidence that Iran has violated the provisions of the deal. Trump has just arbitrarily declared that he doesn't think it's in our nation's interest, even though most of his advisors around him say, yeah, it is. It's keeping Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, Trump is listening to people with a vested interest, pro-Israel bias. Israel wants the United States to go on in and smash up Iran the way Israel got the United States to go in and smash up Iraq. And Trump is unfortunately fully on board with that agenda, is goaded forward by John McCain and Lindsey Graham and supporters like Sheldon Adelson. And so he's going to decertify the nuclear deal just arbitrarily. This is going to cause so much damage to our foreign policy. It is, in fact, the stupidest thing that he could do, because it's sending home a message that no foreign government can trust anything the U.S. government says. Don't trust their promises, they won't be kept. Don't sign the agreements, they'll be broken. It happened in Libya. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Syria. It's now happening in Iran. And it's about to happen with anybody else who makes an agreement with the United States to get rid of a certain category of arms, chemical weapons, biological weapons, or nuclear weapons, on the promise that they won't be invaded, because you will be invaded. Stop listening to what the U.S. government says and look at what the U.S. government is doing. Actions speak far louder than words. Now, getting on over into Syria, apparently ISIS tried a major attack on Sukna, and the Syrian army drove them back. They've retaken Jabal Hazm al-Abyad west of the city, and local sources are saying artillery units hit terrorist positions inside that eastern entrance. Now, the Hezbollah has released a statement saying that members of Liwa Shuhada al-Qaryatayn and Liwa Shahuda Mahin, two groups described by the U.S.-led coalition as the moderate opposition, are among ISIS units operating in the area. So again, there really isn't much of a difference. The U.S. created the fiction of the moderate rebels in order to sort of sell the idea that we're going to give these people weapons to bring down their government. That would be like, Great Britain declaring some of the people here in the United States, like Black Lives Matter, as moderate rebels and then handing them guns. I don't think most Americans would be very happy with that, and I don't think most Syrians are happy with it either. Now, over in Russia, Putin has appointed a new deputy foreign minister, Yevgeny Ivanov, and apparently he's a graduate of the Moscow State University, State Institute of International Relations. He speaks English and Polish along with Russian, so we're probably going to be seeing a little bit more from him. Now, according to a member of the Left Party, the adoption by the Verkhovna Rada of the bill on the reintegration of Donbass is showing that Kiev is getting ready to abandon the Minsk Accord. We seem to be in an age where governments just feel free to break treaties. And that is a tremendous loss, because honoring your treaties was very important. It's even in the Constitution of the United States of America that any treaties signed with foreign governments, as long as they do not conflict with the provisions of the Constitution, they become the highest law of the land. That's how important it was 200 years ago for a government to be seen to hanging on to its treaty obligations. And today it's like anything else. It's just spur of the moment. Yeah, we promised this, and then 2 weeks later, did we promise that? Really? Oh, that was stupid. We shouldn't have done that. Pay no attention. Now, in another indicator that the world is starting to pull away from a U.S.-centric planet, King Salman has met with President Putin. He's urging him to act against Iranian involvement in the region, stressing his support for a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. But basically, the important part here is that Russia and Saudi Arabia are basically putting the decades of tensions between them behind, and they're starting to talk with each other. And for Saudi Arabia to be talking with Russia as opposed to the United States is a serious, serious indicator. And it may well be that Saudi Arabia is feeling they got taken advantage of by acting as the U.S. proxy in this war in Yemen, which has made Saudi Arabia look really bad, cost them a lot of money, a lot of weapons. So they may be pulling away from that. Now, as far as Iranian involvement in the region, it's been rather minor compared to other countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Israel, but we'll see what Putin is going to say about that. Meanwhile, over in China, apparently China's counter-espionage folks have killed or imprisoned up to 20 CIA sources. This is being reported by a state-run newspaper, which is applauding anti-espionage efforts, Schmerz-Spionum, and apparently this is a major blow to CIA spying operations in China, and represents a massive intelligence breach, because they're probably going to get at least some of these CIA's assets to talk. You know, this idea of holding out under torture, that's another myth in the movies. Everybody cracks sooner or later. Now, in response to the continued pressure on Russia Today and other Russian media, the Kremlin is warning that they're going to bring this tit-for-tat fight over the diplomats into the media. If the U.S. continues to try and crack down on Russian media in the United States, Russia, in turn, will start cracking down on American media in Russia. They're talking about banning CNN. Probably a good idea. Banning MSNBC, banning Fox. And reminding everybody that we're supposed to be a nation that values freedom of speech, not just permitted speech. And that is really what it comes on down to. When the United States government is saying you're only going to look at the media we approve, that's not freedom of speech, that's permitted speech. When they try and take down the servers of independent media for questioning the official narrative about anything, that's not freedom of speech. That's permitted speech. We have that First Amendment, and the government has absolutely no justification and no grounds whatsoever to infringe on it. Remember, the Bill of Rights is not the government giving us the rights. It's the government acknowledging we have those rights intrinsically and that they may not trespass upon them. They already have. We've seen the violations of the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Ninth and Tenth Amendment, starting to see infringements on the First Amendment under the guise of combating hate speech. You can't criticize the government of Israel. It's hate speech. And obviously the Second Amendment is now under attack. They're openly talking about trying to repeal it. I don't think they can. Yeah, they can get it through Congress. And yes, the president may sign it. They'll never get 3/4 of the states to ratify it. They'll have to lie about its ratification like they've done with certain other amendments. Let's take a phone call. Brandon in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just had to share kind of a funny thing in these dark times. I passed the Books, Inc. in San Francisco, and I saw a small crowd out front, and I thought, I wonder who's doing a book signing. I wonder if it's Clinton. I look it up online. Sure enough, Hillary Clinton. There's probably 30 people out front. I mean, I think there's like 8 million people in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. She's got one date here, and that's kind of the number she's attracting over here. I had a bit of a laugh over that.
Yeah, I think there was one about 2 weeks ago where she was at one of the big box stores, and they set up her little book signing table over in the dairy section.
Nice. Hey, we're having Fleet Week here, and maybe she's here to quarterback another false flag, the war criminal that she is.
Well, it may be. If Trump wants to go into North Korea, I think he's going to have to stage a false flag. Kim Jong-un may bluster, and I wish he'd shut his mouth sometimes. He's not stupid enough to initiate military action against U.S. forces. So I think we're looking at more false flags going on in to get back into Syria and to go into North Korea. And as soon as Congress voids the P5+1 deal, there'll be something there to go into Iran. I feel like the war hawks are about ready to just crank this up into maximum overdrive because they simply can't wait any longer. They've lost the trust of the American people, they've lost the trust of the American people, and the situation's only getting worse. So I think there's going to be a really big push between now and the end of the year to get all these wars really going for real.
Right. The past is prologue, and we've seen their MO, and I'm a little bit concerned. We have a 3-day music festival here for free in the Golden Gate Park and Fleet Week on the same weekend, which doesn't make sense. But I think Halloween would be a prime target date because you could dress in costume and do a false flag. And I totally agree with you. Just a side note, I've been listening every day, and I've been enjoying every minute of it, staying informed and up to date. You're my number one source of facts. So thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you for the kind words here. And, Brandon, we're going to let you go. In terms of the false flag, my concern is, especially when you're talking about outdoor concerts, Christmas shopping, and the rest of it, if the gun grabbers are not getting the traction from Las Vegas they feel they deserve, I'm very concerned that they may simply launch a whole bunch of these and just keep on shooting people until finally the American public throws their hands up and say, all right, take our guns. Just stop killing us. Because there's almost a feeling of desperation out there. Those in power are aware they are losing power. They're losing control. And if there's one agenda all politicians share, it's clinging to power, no matter what it takes. And so there's an area of concern. All right, let's take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
Mike, I've been watching. You got me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, good. I've been watching this thing about, with that shooting, and I've seen some of these press conferences where you have the sheriff who seems to be pretty open and tries to be honest, and you have this clown who's with the FBI. I think his name is Rouse or Roos, whatever his name is. He's really Ruse, and he seems to be almost like in the background, like guarding the sheriff. He better not say anything too much. He looks to me, he looks like a little pervert anyway, the FBI agent.
Well, apparently somebody actually caught him. Somebody actually caught him on video whispering instructions to the sheriff, saying, "Don't go there." When they were asking about.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
Now, my thing is this. This is the same sheriff, by the way, that he owes something to the public because he betrayed the people of the Bundy Ranch. He didn't do what he should have done, what Mr. Bundy wanted him to do. But he could at least try to make up for it now if he said to himself, you know what? I'm a constitutional sheriff. The sheriff of a county is the highest law enforcement position there is within that county because he's elected directly by the people. He's not appointed by another political hack. He is actually elected by the people. And he has every right to tell the FBI, and I would do that if I was sheriff. I'd tell him, get out of this county before I start locking you up. As a matter of fact, I'm considering you as being suspects in this horror. That's what a good constitutional sheriff. I think that's what a sheriff like Sheriff Mack would have done. I believe Sheriff Clark would have done that. And I think maybe Arpaio might have done that. I'm not sure.
Well, as that earlier caller pointed out correctly, the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction there. The perpetrator lived right there, just an hour from Las Vegas. Nobody has gone across a state boundary. None of this happened on government property. The FBI doesn't actually have jurisdiction there.
No, and another thing people don't understand too about Vegas, and kind of like that with Jacksonville, Florida too. This is how I think it should be all over the country. The sheriff is in charge. He's actually the police chief. He's actually in charge of Las Vegas, of law enforcement in Las Vegas. He's also, of course, in charge of the jails, the corrections.
Well, wait a minute. Okay, we have to be very careful here because, again, everyone's talking Las Vegas. Technically, both the Mandalay Bay and the concert venue were outside the city limits, and we're actually talking about Clark County. And so the sheriff of Clark County, okay.
The sheriff of Clark County is also the sheriff of Las Vegas. I'm saying Las Vegas, there is no police chief. In other words, there's no local that some political hack appoints. He is the elected sheriff of the entire county that includes Las Vegas, and the sheriff's department is responsible for the patrol of the city as well as outside of the city, as well as the jails, as well as the court security, as well as serving warrants. He is the man. I mean, he is in charge. He is elected directly by the people to carry out these functions. Why doesn't he tell this FBI to go, himself?
Jump in the lake here.
I would threaten them with, I'd even threaten them with arrest because I'd say you're interfering with my investigation.
Mark, I got to let you go. Mark, I'm sorry. I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the telephones here. Peter in Halifax, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. So what a pleasure it is to talk to you.
Thank you.
The other day you were mentioning something about Morgellons.
Yes.
And I have had this nightmare with me now for about 8 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You did mention that it seems to be tapering off. Have you had conversations where people have actually have had the disease disappear?
No, what I said is the incidence of new occurrences is tapering off, but I just put up an article from Natural News about the link between Morgellons and genetically modified organisms. And apparently this article...
There's no doubt.
Huh?
There's no doubt. I mean, it's very clear. There's a lot of information. I mean, there's lectures from accredited microbiologists. There's nanotechnologists. It's a real nightmare. But I just like to say to those who might be listening and suffering, it seems to me that after a very long period of time, it's actually going away. Both the external symptoms, where you get the fibers from your skin and the scarring and it's disgusting.
Well, that's good to know.
But actually, actually inside, like I haven't gotten out of the house in a year. You don't know what it does to you. It destroys you. But I'm feeling just so much better lately, and my skin is clearing up really quickly. So I don't want to, I don't want to give any false hope, but perhaps there is some, because to be suffering from this and get absolutely no help or no acknowledgement, it really is a horrific experience. And I'm going to have to phone Tex Mars to tell him the reason why I think it might have helped. A little bit of good and evil working against each other. I think good is starting to take over, Mike. Anyway, and thank you so very much for all you do. I turned a guy on to you today, and Christ, I've been listening to you probably as long as I've had this horrific disease. All the best to you and your lovely wife.
Well, thanks an awful lot, Peter, and I hope you recover fully and that you do so quickly. But again, the indications are that Morgellons disease, which the Orthodox medical community, they're treating it like it's all in your head. The people are giving themselves these sores. The fibers that are in the wounds are actually transferred from their clothing. There's nothing there. It's the typical kind of poo-poo. There's nothing there that lets you know you may have stumbled on something really nasty, like the Nagalase in the vaccines and so forth. But again, I just put up an article from Natural News that talks about the pathway from GMOs to Morgellons disease. Peter, we got to let you go and do a station identification. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go back to the phone lines and talk with Laura in Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you. I have one question. And I don't think I've heard it. There's an autopsy on the shooter, Paddock. What was his estimated time of death?
I have not read the coroner's report, but again, if we're dealing with a staged event, I'm expecting the medical records to be just as phony as those of Vince Foster.
That's what I was afraid of, but it seems to me like it's critical information as to when he was offed.
I would agree if we could get an accurate read on that. But right now, the government is, the FBI, let's be honest about it, the FBI has swooped on down, which is what they do when there's a cover-up going on and it's not even really their jurisdiction, and they're going to control everything. They're going to make sure that all the paperwork lines up with the official story. If you're a student of the Kennedy assassination, you go back and look at how hard they worked to frame Lee Harvey Oswald. for all of this
they
stuff.
worked very hard.
Yeah, they did.
I was actually alive when that happened.
So was I.
That was that was terrible. But I was just curious, because it strikes me as, if we could get an honest answer, really a critical piece of information as to when Paddock died, or approximately what time frame. It would be interesting in the timeline.
It would be,
well,
but like one of the people pointed out, there's already one thing that seems suspicious in the photo of his suicide. One of the patches of blood looks old and dried, and the other one looks like almost brand new, which is not making a lot of sense on that one. Anyway, Laura,
that's quite interesting, and thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Alan in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I called yesterday, and I was talking about James Mirren and Sheldon Ellison. James Mirren is the CEO of Mandalay Bay and MGM Resorts. Anyway, there's new information that came out that James Mirren sold $18 million worth of stock 3 weeks leading up to the shooting. And the second selling of the stock, he did 2 transactions, was on Friday before the shooting. So this is a total inside job. It's not boogeyman idea.
Yeah, that's just a little too cute for him to dump his stock like that before an incident.
Right before.
Which definitely is going to impact tourism to the Mandalay Bay, if not Las Vegas, entirely. By the way, the narrative that Stephen Paddock was firing into the concert because he thought he was going to get all these Trump supporters, that is breaking down because apparently, according to the coroner, 3/5 of the people who were killed at that concert had come on over from California, which, as you know, went to Hillary during the last election. So to all those liberals out there who were celebrating about how these gun-loving Republican Trump supporters got what they deserved, well, apparently 3/5 of them were liberals from California. And so I don't think there's quite enough egg to go around for all your faces, but that's where we are right now.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. But another thing on the Sheldon Ellison, it turns out that him and Michael Chertoff, which are the 2 big mafiosos there in Vegas, both of them own also body scanning and security companies.
Yes.
And metal detecting companies. Now, if you put it all together, I mean, it's, they met. I mean, Sheldon met with Trump the day after. I mean, what's the chance that all these hotels and concerts and malls are down the road not going to have body scanning? And so, I mean, I think this is one of the aspects of that shooting was to get, hey, now we got to body scan everybody going into a concert, into a hotel, into a mall, and I think that's the end game here on some of this.
Well, certainly everybody's going to be trying and exploit the tragedy for their own particular interest. And yeah, I'm sure the Chertoff Group is in there pushing for backscatter machines and metal detectors, which, again, looking at TSA's performance at the airports as judged by the Department of Homeland Security, it doesn't really work all that well. It's more about spending money and making people think they're safe than actually making them safe. And again, with a resort like Las Vegas, especially those resorts that have golf courses nearby, there's going to be a lot of confusion between people taking golf clubs into their hotel rooms as opposed to something with a firearm. And yes, a lot of the modern high-end golf clubs are now carbon fiber, but there's still enough metal in those things. It's going to set off the metal detectors, and it's going to be an inconvenience for everybody.
What about the body scanning, though? Wouldn't that, as far as like when they have a separate thing for the luggage and then the body scan for the person themselves?
I have no idea. Now, obviously, for something big like a gun, you're not going to be able to get that through there. But somebody demonstrated that the body scanner machines are actually easy to fool. They'll see something if it's on your front or back, but if it's actually on your hips against the background, it doesn't show up. And that could include a small handgun.
But don't you think that the whole idea is just to have those there to make the money versus actually
it's just more money making. I mean, Chertoff, when he quit as the head of Homeland Security after setting all this stuff up and saying airports have to have all this stuff, he went into business providing it, and he's laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, this is 1984 coming right at us.
Yeah, it
live.
certainly is. It certainly is.
Well, thank you, Mike, for your time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting on to the economic news, Theresa May is not doing very well in Great Britain. And apparently she's losing ground, and it's starting to impact market sentiment. And that includes the pound itself, which is now taking a little bit of a pummeling. As the world gets more chaotic politically, the more these fiat currencies that aren't supported by a commodity, they're starting to get into areas of turmoil. We're seeing it in Spain over the friction in Catalan. We know the U.S. dollar's in trouble. Now the pound is in trouble. The euro's in trouble because none of these currencies have a commodity base on which to base their value. It's all make-believe, fairy tale money. And it's all very subject to the whims of the public and the bankers as to what it's really worth. Now, apparently the Bank of England is calling for a massive £4 billion bail-in of the banks by 2022. So they're admitting they're hovering on the edge as well. And that's a lot of money. Getting back over to Saudi Arabia, they are threatening to privatize their oil and get out of OPEC. And that may be one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia is pivoting toward Russia, is because most of the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia are owned by Western companies. And if Saudi Arabia privatizes them, there's going to be a tremendous upset over there. Here's another example of the magic accounting system they have inside the U.S. government. According to the Labor Department, the United States lost 33,000 jobs last month, and yet the unemployment rate went down to 4.2%. This is not even in the same time zone as reality. We know there are close to 100 million Americans, legal American citizens, willing and able to work, who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. And they're simply not being counted to get that 4.2%, because that looks good. We don't want to tell the American people what the real unemployment rate is. They might actually want to fire the government. So they're fudging the books. They're lying to you, to put it more directly. Once again, they are lying to you. Now, there's an interesting article coming out of the Daily Mail about how all this talk about a cashless society, it doesn't really seem to be getting any traction. And basically they're talking about how the trend in Great Britain is actually people want to get away from the plastic and go back to cash. And they're talking about these millions of families that have stopped using debit and credit cards, and they want to use the paper money. Because, again, nobody can hack cash. And Victoria Cleland, whose signature is on every banknote issued by the Bank of England, said that the common notion paper money was dying is mistaken. It's not in decline, and it shouldn't be in decline, especially when you consider how vulnerable all these computer systems used for credit cards have turned out to be. It's a good reason to not use credit cards at all, or debit cards. Go back to cash. Now, over in Catalonia, they're talking about concerns, growing concerns. There will be a Spanish civil war. As of Monday, Catalonia will formally declare its independence, and then things are going to get very, very tense. This may be the spark that ignites the entire planet. I mean, there are so many different rulers. Everybody wants a fight. Trump wants to go back into Syria. Trump wants to go into North Korea. Trump wants to go into Iran. ultimately Russia and China. And if Catalonia explodes, it could just really get out of control very quickly. Now, story coming out of Natural News again. Apparently, this teacher sent home notes with the children informing the parents that they were going to take part of a unique classroom activity to study history. And what the activity turned out to be was a slavery simulation in which the teacher literally tied up the kids and locked them in a dark room to simulate conditions on a slave ship. And the parents are furious. They don't see this as education. And it isn't. It's indoctrination. This is teaching children of color, you got to hate the white people. They want to do this to you again. We're heading for a replay of what happened in Zimbabwe, where the black people just took everything over from the white people and then ran it into the ground. One of the rationales that you see coming from the migrants in Europe is this idea they're down in the Middle East or they're down in Africa and they're saying, well, it's not fair that Europe should have all these great buildings and this culture and everything. We have a right to it. Actually, no, you don't. The Europeans built Europe. That's why Europe is the way it is. The Africans built Africa. That's why Africa is the way it is. The Middle Easterners built the Middle East. That's why it's the way it is. All these people in Africa and the Middle East, they're living in the culture and society they themselves created. And if it isn't as grandiose as they'd like it to be, the solution is get back to work and make it what you want it to be. Don't flood into England or flood into Europe and say, well, this is now ours, and we're going to make it ours, and you all have to follow our laws now. And by the way, where are the girls? Because we're desirous of raping them. This is being fanned up deliberately by the globalists who are trying to erase cultural differences, identity, and history to make us easier to control. That's the agenda here. Now, over in California State University at Berkeley, students are protesting exams, and they're demanding exams be take-home, meaning you get the exam, you get to go home, you get to use your books and your computer to finish the test and bring it back the next day. And they're basically saying that the people administering the tests are all white supremacists. That's the new thing. Anytime you're being held to a level of achievement, oh, you're being a white supremacist. Those slave owners, they demanded that we work harder, and we're not going to do that anymore. Boy, California really has gone nuts. I mean, when I lived there, I enjoyed it, certainly working both at JPL and NASA and the film industry, but I don't think Claire and I could ever live there again. It's just gone wacko bananas over there. All right, let's take a phone call. Murr in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. There's a YouTube, Victoris Libertas, it's under Las Vegas doctor and resident analyze the tragedy. It's Patricia Aiken in there and Michelle Thompson with Jim and Angie. But, they saw Robert David Steele on there and wanted to, they didn't think he was telling it like it really is. Apparently this was a hybrid. It's, drive-by shootings or whatever, and there were injuries and probably deaths. But about 20 minutes into the video, she shows a site called itmattershowyousstand.com, and that has the court papers for the Bundy Ranch. Mesquite, Nevada is right next to the Bundyville, or what do you call it? Bunkerville.
Yes.
Yes, and so anyway, it has it in these court papers that how this is going to affect the trials. They won't be taking plea deals, and it'll also mess up the jury, of course. And like they state, there's concerts there all the time, punk, rock, whatever. But this had to be country. So, of course, that's cowboys and probably white Christians, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's all related to that, Paddock is definitely just a patsy. There were 7 different occurrences. I guess you probably saw that at Jim Stone. There was drive-bys. So that's how they went around. That's why there were so many different sounds, I guess. They hit Bellagio and New York, and some others.
Here's what I have a problem with that, okay? If you're trying to push a gun grabber agenda and you're trying to have a patsy, a crazed lone nut, raging white male, why would you follow it up with these other drive-bys? Now, I haven't been to Las Vegas. I haven't been to Las Vegas in a lot of years, and maybe drive-bys just happen there on a regular basis, and it's hushed up.
There's several agendas.
Okay, but in this case, you're contradicting the primary one. And so far, I've heard that there were shootings at the Bellagio. Actually, the number keeps going up. Now I think it's about 6 other casinos where they're saying there was shooting a half hour after the Mandalay Bay incident. But so far...
I heard there was even before, and they were breaking the glass, yeah.
I haven't seen any photos of any of that yet. It's a lot of hearsay, and I think it's being put out there to try and keep the issue confused and pull our attention away from the inconsistencies in the Mandalay Bay story. But again, the idea is, maybe drive-by shootings are just that common in Las Vegas. But again, why would you do that and undermine the primary message of the Mandalay Bay, which is, a crazed, lone, raging white male nobody would have ever suspected of committing a crime, and he just snaps and goes on a gun rampage, and that's why we have to ban guns for everybody. If you follow that up with other people shooting up hotels, then that first message is lost, and it's just, obvious street crime.
It's not just ban guns. It's not just ban guns, though. That's the thing.
Well,
there's several agendas here.
I understand that. I understand that. But what they're doing with this other agenda is they're undermining the ban gun agenda, which seems to be the primary one. And yes,
I don't think they care. They did the same thing at Sandy Hook. They have several agendas going on at the same time to try to get you to, for whatever the overall purpose is. Mostly, it's confusion. They want confusion.
Well, I understand they want confusion. They're concerned that the independent media is already picking the Mandalay Bay story apart, and they're going to throw a lot of nonsense out there, like, over at 9/11, the no plane at the Pentagon stuff. They're trying to throw a lot of nonsense out there. But I still have not seen any confirmation of these other shootings. Anyway, got to let you go. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. This is actually over at NBC News. The plot thickens. Investigators are looking at evidence that there was, in fact, somebody else in Stephen Paddock's room at the Mandalay Bay. Apparently, they found a cell phone charger in the room that doesn't match any of the cell phones that belong to the gunman, Stephen Paddock. And second, Mandalay Bay does have good security, like my friend who was in Las Vegas was mentioning. The Mandalay Bay's garage records are showing that when Paddock's car had left the hotel garage, somebody went into his room using a key card, either Stephen's key card or a copy clone of it. Now, a lot of people were saying, oh, well, he went crazy because he owed all this money. He was a gambler. Apparently, according to the IRS, he was a good gambler. Remember, there was that story from his brother. He won $40,000 on a single pull of a slot machine. But according to IRS records, he earned at least $5 million in 2015, most of it from gambling. He was a good gambler. And if you know the games and you know the odds and you're careful, you can actually make money as a gambler. They're only going to throw you out if they catch you cheating. All right, let's take a phone call. Alan in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you, Michael. This is just off topic, just for a minute, if you don't care. I wanted to ask you a question. about the economy in Hawaii. I can't understand it, other than natives living there, how people could even live there because of it being so expensive. Can you give me an idea of what the minimum wage is now? Because the only reason I'm saying is my son was stationed there for a while, and then he was telling me how expensive a gallon of milk and stuff was, and I just couldn't believe it.
It is insanely expensive, and it's getting a lot worse. The state government has been forced to raise the hotel room tax on tourists, trying to cover the shortfall from the light rail project. This is a major reason Claire and I would like to get back to the mainland. In a way, we're kind of trapped out here, and of course, if we're going to be trapped someplace, Hawaii isn't too bad. But we've turned into Hawaiian sourdoughs. We're sour on Hawaii, but we don't have the dough to leave. And yeah, it is hideously expensive. You can save some of your money by avoiding the big box supermarkets and going to the local farmers markets. There's still a bunch of those around, and you can get your produce from there at a much lower price. But you just have to learn how to live cheap. Again, we're driving an 18-year-old car. And we're faced with the reality we're going to have to get a newer car sometime soon, and we're kind of a little panicked on how we're going to be able to pay for it. I mean, we've got a good credit rating, but it's just really nervous out here. And of course, looming over all of it is this pending war with North Korea, because we're hearing a lot of heavy military metal going in and out of Hickam down there.
Yeah. Well, I sure appreciate you, everything you're talking about. I'm listening to you, definitely. My son had a truck shipped over that he'd bought over there.
Yep.
And shipped back to the States, to Louisiana, and I think it was $2,000 or $3,000 just to have that truck shipped.
That's about right. Now, when we first moved out here from Washington State, so that I could work on Final Fantasy, I think the total bill for the moving came in at about $8,000, and that included $1,000 for bringing our Honda with us. And of course, inflation has hit everything. The last estimate we got, and leaving most of what we own behind, it's going to be $20,000 to get back to the mainland. So it's just out of control. It's just
yes, it is out of control. What is the minimum wage here? Do you know?
I actually don't know. I can imagine. Well, you'd probably find it with a Google search.
What's a pack of cigarettes, sir?
Have no idea. I don't smoke.
Yeah, well, I understand that too, but I know that they're saying that it's $7, $8, $9 in New York. I don't know if that's true. That's just what I hear.
I'll tell you what. I'm going out to the shopping mall. I'll price them out, and I'll mention it on the show on Monday. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
Mike. All right, bye.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And Gun Owners of America has issued their statement on bump fire stocks. They're taking the opposite position from the NRA and saying that they absolutely oppose a ban on bump stocks. And they're pointing out the fact that bump stocks were approved by the ATF during the Obama administration to help gun owners with disabilities fire their weapons. And again, pointing out, any ban will be ignored by the criminals and only disarm honest citizens. And again, a bump stock, it's not a precision piece of metal. You can 3D print those, or you can machine them out of a block of phenolic. So again, I was thinking maybe it was an okay idea to ban them, but as I mentioned earlier in the show, I've reversed that. No, I don't want any more gun regulations. They only help the criminals. Apparently, they figured out where all these reports of additional shootings at the casinos in Las Vegas came from, and it makes a lot of sense. Apparently, as the people fled the concert venue, they were seeking shelter in some of these other casinos. And you look at these casinos, the Bellagio and everything, they're right in the same area. And so these people were running on in saying, there's a shooting outside, there's a shooting outside. People started grabbing their cell phones and calling 911, reporting there's a shooting at the Bellagio, not realizing that the people who were crying and screaming in front of them were talking about the assault from the Mandalay Bay into the Route 91 concert. So that appears to be the origin of all of that. All right, let's go back on over to the telephone system, and we're going to talk to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I agree that the takeover has begun. I mean, I still feel that we can keep our rights. We have a better chance if we don't give the globalists an out-and-out excuse to overpower us. But I do agree that there's that in saying, looking at everything, and the fact that the globalists and those who do their bidding seem to have become so bold. And it's like they don't care how they appear to us, and this is going to be their downfall, I think. They've started digging their own grave. It's like as they become more violent towards us and violate whatever rights they want to violate, just blatantly confuse us, thinking, that they'll show us what will happen to us if we try anything with them, create false flags and trouble with war and all this. As they do this, they lose their credibility. They don't want us to push too hard back because if we do, they'll give us the impression that they'll just annihilate us. But their credibility is suffering here. They're making mistakes. They're finding people they will find people within their ranks, I think, that have a heart and are saying, I can't do this anymore, and will stand in their way. So it's like the more they do this,
but people like that tend to wind up the way Seth Rich did. I mean, that was what Seth Rich did. He said, I can't do this anymore, and they just simply killed him. There are two developments on the horizon that I think support your position. One is the fact that barring an all-out attack by the United States on Damascus to just kill Assad where he stands, the U.S. has lost in Syria, and that is going to seriously derail the war agenda. It's showing the world that the U.S. military is not invincible, that it is not almighty, and it looks like we're going to get a civil war in Catalonia, which if Catalonia succeeds in enforcing its independence, that's going to send a message to a lot of other countries. Yeah, independence is possible. And I think we listed the other day, there's some 7 other regions in the European Union are already getting ready to hold their own independence referendums. We're all sick and tired of globalists. We're all sick and tired of empires. The larger governments get, the more abusive they get. We want to go back to little tiny nations that we can be proud of, where we can have a decent, comfortable life, take care of those that we love. And that's all we really want out of life.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are joining us, and those who are on the other side, like I said, will start joining us. I'm glad that you can point to that as already having happened. They're just hurting themselves, and so I hope we will kind of refrain from being too aggressive. I think their aggressiveness will turn more people against them than we could ever turn on them to change them. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what happened in Catalonia. A lot of the Catalonians were undecided on the independence referendum until they saw the Spanish police literally stomping people into the ground. And that made up their mind. We have to be free. Again, I don't want to see a civil war in this country, but it looks like we may have to go through one anyway. Nobody should try and start it, but it could just erupt spontaneously. I keep thinking about Romania when Ceausescu was brought down, and it was just like incredibly fast. 2 weeks before he was killed, you would have walked around Romania, and there were TV cameras on the streetlights and everything, but it looked like the Romanian people were okay with their country, and then all of a sudden, there was a rally at a sporting event that turned into a spontaneous political event, and the entire country got on the move, and 2 weeks later, Ceausescu was machine gunned to death on Romanian TV. It could happen just that fast here.
Yes. Well, we'll see, but I think we should have some hope here, because they are really, really shooting themselves in the foot, which is putting it mildly.
Yes.
It's going to become like the mainstream media will just be like a joke. You'll listen to it and people will just think, well, this is a joke. You know, and a lot of these people we looked up to, like Charlie Rose, I always looked up to Charlie Rose. It's like, oh no. You know, he's a completely different person to me now. And all these burst bubbles, a lot of them burst bubbles across the nation, you know, as people start seeing things for what they really are.
Yes.
And I look forward to that slowly taking shape. So.
All right. Well, we're on the path. We're definitely on the path here. And again, every day, more and more Americans are waking up. And they're ignoring what the government and the corporate media say, and they're watching what the government is doing, and they're not at all pleased with it. Some of them are still playing that good German idea that if I don't complain, I don't say anything, and I do as I'm told, I'll be left alone. It didn't work for the German people. Those who went along with Hitler just because they were afraid to stand up to Hitler and the Nazis, they still lost their country and their livelihood and their homes. They lost everything. So playing the safe path is not going to get you where you want to go.
That's true. That's true. But they will do themselves a whole more damage, I think, than we could ever do them. Because look at how they confuse us. I mean, it's so ridiculous. It's just, it's like your caller was saying, they're looking worse and worse all the time.
They are.
I don't know how anyone can miss it unless they're as bad as they are. And I have more faith in my fellow Americans and to think that they will buy into that junk too much longer. So.
Well, we'll see. We're in a very chaotic, dangerous time in the history of our nation and the history of the world. We are hovering at the edge of World War III, and I don't see, once it gets going, I don't see any way to keep it from going nuclear. Anyway, Sherry, we're going to let you go. We're going to switch over to Tom in Philadelphia. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there?
Mike, just wanted to make a comment about what you said about this guy being a good gambler. Hitting a $40,000 jackpot doesn't really mean anything because if I go in, I've hit $10,000-$20,000 in a day, but let's say I go in and I lose, I lose $5,000-$6,000, and then I hit a $4,000 jackpot. Well, I still have to get a W-2 or a 1099, whichever one they use, to report that. Anything over a $1,200 jackpot, you have to report to the IRS. But you could be winning jackpot, but you still could be losing. So
yeah,
the only
but
way to tell if he's really a good gambler is to look at his end of the year statement.
If you list your occupation as gambler, then you also get a slip of paper saying that you lost so much money, and that also goes in with your tax returns. And that's apparently what this guy considered his job.
No, that's at the end of the year. No, that's at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You get a final statement. But,
I understand that. But for 2015, the tax records are showing this guy made millions of dollars as a gambler. Okay.
I'm leery of that.
Well,
having been a professional player for over 30 years, I don't know anybody that can really do that consistently. Unless they're cheating or using, unless they're card counters. And I don't think he's a card counter.
Well, we don't know. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to be a card counter.
No, not really.
Well,
I've been doing it for 30 years.
Okay,
I'm not a real bright guy.
Apparently not as well as Stephen Paddock could do it. So thank you very much for the information, and we're going to let you go. But again, one of the stories they were trying to put on out to sell you on the idea that this Stephen Paddock just flipped out and shot all these people at the concert, as it turns out, most of them from California, a bunch of liberals, is that he was heavily in gambling debt. And remember when the Mandalay Bay came on out, and they said these are the transactions for his gambling, but they wouldn't say if they were wins or losses. And now we know that for the most part they're wins. He was apparently very good at being a gambler. And yes, he had other investments that were paying off as well, but he wasn't hurting for money. He wasn't in trouble from his gambling. Let's look at alcohol. There are people who are out of control drunks, and there are people who socially drink. They've got it under control. And the same thing is true of gambling. And again, I spent a lot of time in Las Vegas working back when I was a professional magician. And I got to see both kinds. People who were social gamblers, who had disposable income, they'd go into the casinos and they'd say, this is how much I have to play with, and when it's gone, I'm quitting and I'm going home. And that's all well and good, and they have a lot of fun, and they get a lot of free drinks, and so forth. Then you have the true addicts who go on in, and they can't stop. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of these clinics in Las Vegas to deal with gambling addiction, mostly from the local residents. People will move into Las Vegas or North Las Vegas, and they get caught up in the casinos, and just like smokers or alcohol, they can get in too deep and they need help to get on out. I never really got into the gambling, partly because as a magician, I knew how easy it is to cheat, and I knew the mathematics behind the casinos. The games are set up so that a steady percentage of the money goes to the house. Overall, the house is always winning. I used to joke that they ever changed blackjack to 22, I would own that strip, but we were never able to get that change made on in there. Okay, getting on back to the news here. This really bothers me. This is out of womensystems.com. And apparently parents have been charged with manslaughter after their newborn dies from treatable jaundice because the patients refuse to seek medical help on the excuse that God does not make mistakes. And basically the parents said, God is perfect, God made our baby will be fine. No, the baby died. And they've been charged with manslaughter. They could spend the next 15 years in jail. So, I mean, that newborn is an innocent who lost their life because of fairy tales. And every time somebody does something like this, it only strengthens the government's position that they ought to be making medical decisions for you and your children. That you're all just too dumb to take care of it yourself. Now, up in Canada, they've opened up a new National Holocaust Monument. And it's an impressive building. It's in the form of a diagonally stretched Star of David. And Jewish groups demanded that the dedication plaque for this National Holocaust Monument be removed because it didn't specifically mention Jews. The dedication plaque says that this monument honors the millions of men, women, and children murdered during the Holocaust. And that's not good enough. Boy, talk about ingratitude. There's no making those people happy. All right, let's take another phone call. Curtis in Nevada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I've been listening to you today, and a point up earlier about the money that was lost, the trillions that are unaccounted for. You've heard stuff about black ops, where most of that money is going to black ops, weapons technology that we know nothing about. And then also, you've got a lot of underground bunker type stuff that's being built. And I mean, that's happening all over the world too, not just in this country. And,
they've been doing that for 10 years. They put one in under the northeast corner of Griffith Park near the emergency command post under the Hollywood sign. We have one here in the middle of the H3, tunneled into the Ko'olau Mountains. There's another one supposedly under the new Denver airport. And apparently the engineers goofed on that one because there's some subsidence issues that are cracking the overhead buildings. But yeah, the U.S. government loves to tunnel into the ground. Apparently, to judge from what I see on Google Earth, they have reactivated the Cheyenne Mountain facility. We know that the Greenbrier has been converted from a tourist attraction back to an active emergency bunker. So yeah, they're getting all ready for this kind of stuff right now. But still in all, $21 trillion, I don't think it's all been spent on black ops and bunkers. I think a lot of it's just plain old graft and corruption because certainly Elizabeth Warren was out there looking at HUD and just seeing all this money that was loaned out on properties that didn't even really exist, and then the loans defaulted, which means somebody just walked out of HUD with a pocket full of cash. Now, maybe it was a front for military development, or maybe, again, looking at the last 30 years of corruption, where everybody in politics seems to think it's a license to loot the people. We have this story coming out from Imran Awan about how the Democratic members of the House were fudging their office budgets. There's another story out of New York about how a district attorney up there was accepting bribes from a law firm to cut sweetheart plea deals for their clients. And so, yeah, we live in a corrupt age, and I think a lot of that $21 trillion went to just flat-out corruption. We got to take a break here for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, coming up in the top of the hour, and we're going to talk to Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Good afternoon. You know, here's the bottom line to all this Las Vegas nonsense. The guy's gun was legal. Everything on his gun was legal. All the ammunition was legal. In case closed, unless you want to find out who actually was behind all this, all those issues are dead issues.
Well, again, they're pushing the gun grabber agenda with it, and apparently Dianne Feinstein is already out there saying she wants a ban on any device that increases the rate of fire for any gun. That presumably would include things like the Hellfire second trigger or cranks or anything at all that increases the rate of fire. She wants a ban on it because law-abiding citizens need to be disarmed in the face of the government and crime.
And I think gun owners of America answered that question very succinctly and beautifully. Those devices were made for people who are handicapped so that they would be able to shoot like our disabled veterans who still look at shooting and view shooting and participate in shooting as a sport like many Americans such as yourself may have.
Absolutely. And again, there's a double standard at work. When a Muslim commits an act of terror, we're told don't blame all Muslims for it. And yet when a shooter commits a shooting, they blame all gun owners collectively and say, let's take all the guns away, because they have no real legitimate use. Yeah, they do. Protect our home. I'm one of the people who's had to chase a burglar out of my home with a firearm. And I'm lucky I didn't have to pull the trigger, but it still was very effective at getting the criminal out of my home here. If you want to talk about getting rid of something that's utterly useless, let's get rid of baseball, because a lot of people are murdered with baseball bats every single year. And baseball is completely useless. It serves no purpose. So, let's hit a ball with a stick and run around in a circle. People go to baseball because it's fun. It's fun. And you're not going to take away baseball from people because of those individuals who club other people to death with a baseball bat. So why would you take away the guns of law-abiding citizens because some person or persons unknown shot into a concert from the Mandalay Bay?
Well, exactly. In your case in point, an individual citizen like you was able, without firing a shot, bringing any harm to anybody, to evade the potential ability of an intruder to bring some type of harm to you just by owning a firearm.
And that happens. That happens 1.5 million times every single year, and that's not reported by the corporate media. Anyway,
exactly. And you know what? I appreciate gun owners of America for that very astute commentary, as well as I do you. And thanks a bunch, Mike. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to try and start with Chet in Michigan. Aloha, Chet. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Just a couple of quick points. I think it's been like 5 days now, and we haven't heard any hard evidence, and it's got to come out eventually. But they did mention a computer that the shooter had. Of course, I'm talking about Vegas. There's going to be a lot of information there, I'm sure, even if it's just checking his comp points. I'm sure he used this computer.
Yeah, we'll see. But again, if it's a frame-up, they'll just plant stuff there. Chet, I got to let you go. We got to do station identification. The lovely Lady Claire is coming up next hour. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, and yes, BAM User just had a glitch, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to join us on Friday afternoons with her unique perspective on the world. So, Lady Claire, take it away.
Okay. This comes to us from Sputnik. And the title, and you can never fault the Russians for their sense of humor, even though this is a very dark issue. Wholly tasteless. New Batman video game depicts murdered Russian diplomat's body. The newest video from developer Telltale Games series Batman, The Enemy Within, features a photo of the corpse of Russian ambassador to Turkey Andrei Karlov, who was assassinated in December 2016. Now, Karlov was a veteran diplomat who at one point served as the director of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Department of Consular Affairs, which provides passports and visa services, and was killed during a scheduled speech at an art exhibition celebrating Turkish-Russian friendship. That didn't go so well.
No, not very friendly.
And he was shot down by a Muslim who said, "Do not forget Aleppo, do not forget Syria," before being... And the gunman was himself downed by Turkish security forces. Now, I'm kind of wondering about this, Mike, as you and I know, the military intelligence assets in this country work hand in hand with the video computer gaming industry every day. So
That's why there's so many of these games about fighting wars and
demonization of certain countries. So what I'm having to wonder...
Oh, by the way, and if your kid does really well at these military games, expect a knock on the door from the recruiters.
Yeah. So I have to wonder if the founders of this company, Dan Connors, Kevin Bruner, and Troy Melander, are perhaps covert CIA U.S. military assets who understand that if you are going to demonize a country, let's say for the sake of explanation, Russia, to your population, particularly to the young people who will ultimately be drafted to fight that country, you start with the young men who are the primary players of computer games, to demonize that country, which is ultimately going to be the recipient of an American military attack. Now, this particular game has been released rather recently, so I have to wonder about the timing of what may be an ongoing shooting war. And there are so many places where this could happen. It could happen in Syria. It could happen with Ukraine. All of the war games right on Russia's border, vis-a-vis the release of this video game and how the owners of Telltale bet on the release of this game to continue the demonization in which the corporate prostitutes are collaborating so cheerfully.
Well, it is a full-court press. I mean, everywhere you go is Russia bad, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you don't want Russian dressing on your salad. You want French dressing. You want American dressing. You know, I just realized there is no such thing as American salad dressing.
No.
There's a product idea.
Okay, all right.
So
but,
it's like 2 parts oil and 3 parts beer and...
Smush them all together. Smush them all together. A very interesting thing happened at a university that I would like to look at. The revolution will not uphold the Constitution. Hard left, Black Lives Matter agitators disrupt ACLU free speech event. And there's something really ironic about that. A group of hard left agitators affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement disrupted a free speech event put on by the American Civil Liberties Union at the College of William and Mary, rushing the stage and preventing the guest from even speaking while chanting Antifa-like slogans about how bad the country is and the need to shut down free speech once and for all. Kind of makes you wonder. And apparently, the ACLU's Claire Gastagna was at the college to speak about the subjects of students and the First Amendment, but shortly after taking the stage, she was overrun by BLM protesters who made it clear that they were there to do only one thing: shut down free speech completely. Now, as a Reason magazine reported, this disruption was live-streamed and documented. A variety of very shocking statements made by the group that paint a clear picture of who the people on the hard left really are, as well as what they seem to be willing to do to achieve their goals. And, Mike, I've got to tell you, Black Lives Matter, Asian lives matter. Indian lives matter. Central Asian, all lives matter.
Oh, you racist, you.
Oh, come on.
No, seriously, when you say all lives matter, you're denounced as a racist. I mean, it really is ridiculous here. And apparently, as we reported yesterday, there's a professor over at Loyola Marymount
I saw that
University who's out there saying that, yes, it's perfectly acceptable for the progressives to use violence to push their agenda. If the voters are just too dumb to see what is good for them and vote for what we want, then it's okay for us to go and just beat them upside of the head. So they are openly talking about violence, and apparently there is going to be a White Lives Matter rally over the weekend, and everybody's already saying it's going to be a target.
Yeah.
It's going to be a target. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And what is your next story?
Well, I'd like to continue with this, if I may.
Okay, yes.
I am very concerned about the coming Antifa protests, which are supposed to start, I believe, 4 November.
Yes.
Threatening to take over the United States government and depose Trump and Pence.
Who do they think they're going to put in there? I mean, if you've got these Black Lives Matter people at this that crashed this conference, and they're out there saying that they're not going to uphold our Constitution in their revolution, then what they're talking about is they already have somebody they want to put into the White House. Gee, I wonder who that might be.
I couldn't even begin to imagine, my dear. But if these...
Initial H.
Yes, I know. I was going to use an analogy, but I stopped myself just at the appropriate moment.
All right.
What their actions are probably most likely to achieve, if people are foolish enough to believe that this kind of behavior will bring about the changes they seek, will be a suspension of the Constitution and Bill of Rights and the imposition of martial law in this country. Now, that's hardly a place any sane Americans want to be. I mean, at least from my perspective.
Well, I'll tell you something from my perspective. Antifa is talking about a revolution on November 4th. The general population of this country is a long way away from being ready for any kind of revolution.
I agree.
And I think whatever's going to happen on November 4th, it's probably going to be newsworthy, like all the riots that followed Trump's victory in last November's election.
Yep.
And remember, they were out there and they were saying, not my president, never Trump, and they were smashing windows and causing violence, even in cities that had voted for Hillary Clinton, or maybe they didn't really vote for Hillary Clinton, so they felt it was okay to smash them up. But ultimately, it fizzled out.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that even George Soros has enough money to buy 100 million Americans, because that's how many it would take, to actually overthrow the U.S. government.
Yeah. I'd like to now look at this huge earthquake swarm at Yellowstone supervolcano.
Yes.
It's become now one of the longest ever recorded tags. And apparently these rumblings are just not quitting, and it looks like it's the longest ever recorded, having started on June 12th. And over the past 3.5 months, almost 2,500 earthquakes have been recorded in the western part of the national park. This is on par with the biggest swarm ever recorded, which was more than 3,000 earthquakes that took place over 3 months. The USGS has said 115 quakes had been reported in the park in September. Of these, 78 were part of the ongoing swarm 6 miles north of West Yellowstone. The biggest event in the swarm last month was magnitude 2.3. Now, Mike, I'm no volcanologist, but this looks like it's a prelude to a very intense event.
Well, it could very well be, because a lot of people are very concerned because of all the other volcanoes around the Ring of Fire that are going off. And apparently the Bali volcano, Mount Agung, they've had an increase in seismic activity, 23% in 24 hours. They think that one's going to blow. 3 explosive blasts out of Popocatépetl in Mexico in 2 hours, and now Shinmodaki volcano in Japan has rumbled to life. So it's like the entire Ring of Fire is just rocking and rolling right now. Now, technically, the Yellowstone supervolcano is not on the Ring of Fire, we think.
Yeah.
But again, nobody knows how deep that magma chamber goes, or how far to the west it reaches. and it could, in fact, reach all the way over to that Cascadia fault structure, which means if there's we're starting to see seismic activity on the Cascadia fault.
Mm-hmm.
So we could be looking at a really, really big event. But as I said yesterday, for those of you who believe that there's a god or gods up there that orders all things to happen, then he, she, or they appear to be very angry with the United States constant going around the world violating thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's property, so forth and so on. And but yeah, there's definitely something really happening. Maybe the Earth is going to hatch, and Cthulhu is going to burst forth.
I would tend to think not. I'd like to go over now to the situation with the referendum, which I think most of our readers and listeners are familiar with, to create an independent Kurdistan out a portion of Iraq. So now Iran, Iraq, and Turkey are uniting to block Turkish oil exports. These countries have taken a unified stand against Kurdistan's oil sector. Because remember, it's got one of the richest oil deposits in the entire area. After the region elected to seek independence from Baghdad in a referendum this last month, according to a new report by Ruda. And the article says, in the case of northern Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, they're going to form what they call a tripart mechanism, whatever the heck that means, and will decide on shutting down the oil. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said after meetings with leaders from the other two nations on Thursday. A day before the vote, the Iraqi central government issued a statement calling on neighboring countries and countries of the world to stop buying crude oil directly from Kurdistan and only deal with Baghdad. I'm afraid the horse is out of the barn on that one. And the question I have to ask, Mike, how practically are Iran, Turkey, and Iraq going to do this without literally blowing up the oil rigs?
Well, just look at a map and see where those oil delivery pipelines go. Remember, Kurdistan is landlocked. It's not like they can use oil tankers. You know, they're hostage to the countries that have those pipelines.
Right.
And if all those countries that border Kurdistan decide to shut those pipelines, that's basically the end of the deal. The question is, how long can Baghdad continue to support market demand without having to militarily go back into Kurdistan, at which point we're going to have yet another Iraq war
Civil
on
war.
our hands.
And it's interesting, Russia, a week before the referendum, signed off on an independent deal with Kurdistan regarding its oil. So I would suggest that this tripart group, Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, might want to tread a little bit gently on any Russian resolved to see an independent Kurdistan.
Well,
that could be the
Iraq
fly
will not
in the,
go gently, Turkey won't go generally, but Iran might cave because they're getting buddy-buddy with the Russians. They know that the Russians are the only thing standing between them and eventual U.S. invasion.
Right.
They may leave that pipeline open, and that would certainly change things.
Oh, that would change the dynamics.
Yes.
And here again, with a little bit of a wink and a nod, Russian hackers win again. John Kelly's personal cell phone allegedly compromised for months. And again, tongue-in-cheek, is John Kelly the latest victim of the now infamous, pesky, yet extremely elusive Russian hackers that allegedly cost Hillary Clinton the 2016 election and are slowly taking over the world? According to Politico, he just might be. White House officials believe that Chief of Staff John Kelly's personal cell phone was compromised, potentially as long ago as last December, according to 3 U.S. officials. The discovery raises concerns that hackers or foreign governments may have had access to information on Kelly's phone while he was Secretary of Homeland Security and after he joined the West Wing. Tech support discovered the suspected breach after Kelly turned in his phone to White House tech support this summer, complaining that it wasn't working or updating software properly. Kelly told the staffers the phone hadn't been working properly for months, according to the officials. So, let us track the logic here. Kelly's personal phone misbehaves for months, and he doesn't have the horse sense to get it checked when it originally stopped working the way it should have. And this is one of the guys who has the ear of the President of the United States. People, be very afraid. Very afraid.
It's not just that he has the ear of the President of the United States of America, is that he controls who gets to the President.
And what gets to him.
Yeah, and right now, Dana Rohrabacher is still unable to get a meeting with President Trump over the proposed deal where Julian Assange will turn over information proving that the DNC emails were leaked, not hacked, and in exchange for a pardon. Now, as far as what's going on with Kelly, everybody blames Russia for everything, and again, there's no evidence. Remember, all of our cell phones are backdoored by the NSA and the CIA. So if these phones are non-secure, it is the fault of the U.S. government itself for drilling these holes into our phone systems, and then they get all upset when somebody finds it and uses it against a government official. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't have windows into everybody's life and then get upset when somebody peeks through, which is exactly what's happened here. And don't forget, we know that U.S. government agencies were wiretapping and spying on Donald Trump and his friends and associates and staff both before and after the election. There's no reason John Kelly wouldn't have been on that list. And so given that we know that the FBI was doing this, I would say that the tapping of Kelly's phone probably originated much closer to home, and considering how badly they botched up the job, that also points to the FBI. Because when you put malware on a phone, you don't want it to do anything that calls attention to itself.
Absolutely.
And this obviously did, and so I would say that, it's another classic FBI quality job.
Well, this comes to us from Zero Hedge, which is a blog for which I have a great deal of respect. Apparently, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been caught fabricating wage data.
Oh, tell me it's not so.
You're shocked, I can tell.
Oh, I'm all a quiver.
While it's not the first time they've observed the BLS manipulating data, the last time was in This is what happens when the Bureau of Labor Statistics is caught in a lie. Never before had we actually caught the Bureau of Labor Statistics openly fabricating data until now. As reported earlier today in one of the most closely watched statistics in today's payrolls, the BLS reported that the annual increase in average weekly earnings was a whopping 2.9% above the 2.5% expected and above the 2.5% reported last month. On the surface, this sounded like a great number, as the 2.9% annual increase, weather distorted by hurricanes or not, was the highest since the financial crisis. However, in looking at the numbers, there was a decrease in that number rather than an increase. And, it's right there in black and white. You look at it at Zero Hedge and you think, what are these people trying to do? Because it's very obvious that they fudged the data.
Well, they're trying to keep the American people calm and reassured that everything is fine so that we don't get out the tar and feathers. It's the same kind of thinking that takes almost 100 million Americans unable to find a job and magically transforms it to a 4.2% unemployment rate.
Just wiping them off the statistics.
Yeah, they're cooking the books.
Yeah. Right. And I have something that only in California. I think we should have a segment that says only in California. California can now jail people for misusing gender pronouns. I did not make this up, I swear. They can be jailed who refuse the preferred gender pronouns of nursing home residents after Democratic Governor Jerry Brown signed the bill Thursday. Still the moonbeam. The law's effect is limited to nursing homes and other long-term care facilities, but mandates that those who willfully and repeatedly refuse to use a transgender resident's preferred name or pronouns can be slapped with a $1,000 fine and up to 1 year in prison, according to the California Health and Safety Code.
Well, we got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back.
Yep.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the Lady Claire, I want to make a point of picking up on Tropical Storm Nate, which is expected to achieve hurricane force as it travels over the Gulf of Mexico this weekend. And it is aimed, unfortunately, right now at those poor people in Louisiana, New Orleans, Mississippi, and on up into the heartland of America. Again, do your preparations now. Don't wait till the last minute. I would imagine after the storms that have already gone through there, that probably the supermarkets are already being emptied out of bottled water and everything. So make a point today of getting your preparations done. Okay, back to you.
This comes from antiwar.com. Again, another very serious and analytical blog. And the U.S. Congress is trying to give the F-35 a pass for all of its problems. The $700 billion Defense Authorization Bill for 2018 contains a number of provisions that are likely to increase the risk of cost overruns for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program and undermine the ability of Pentagon officials and Congress to assess the combat suitability of new weapon systems in the future.
In other words, just keep on sending the money over there and don't look too close at where it's going.
One of the central debates for the F-35 program, Mike, is whether it will be more combat capable than the systems it's replacing. The most controversial of these claims has been that the F-35 would be an acceptable close air support replacement for the A-10, which even the Air Force officials eventually had to back off from.
Well, I can certainly see why. It's not hardened. I mean, the A-10, and again, it's a classic case. If something's working, why fix it or replace it? The A-10, the pilot literally sits in this titanium bathtub. The entire cockpit is shielded by this titanium from ground fire. The F-35 doesn't have that. And the thing that makes the A-10 an effective tank killer is that 30-millimeter rotary cannon, which literally the fuselage is built around. And you don't have that capacity in the F-35. In fact, apparently the few times they've test-fired the internal cannon, it's actually distorting the frame of the aircraft. So no way could they put that 30-millimeter on that airframe. It would just crumple it up.
You know, what I have to wonder is how much Lockheed Martin is paying these congressional representatives for giving this, for including this language in this defense authorization bill.
I'm sure that they're very generous campaign donors.
Yes, must be.
You know, but it's costing them a lot less money than it would cost to actually make the thing work properly.
Yeah, which hasn't happened.
No.
And, you know, all the evaluations that I've read from people who are pretty understanding in this area, have the wisdom and the scientific knowledge, say it's a hot mess.
It's a boondoggle. It's a flying boondoggle.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate wars as a way to resolve geopolitical situations. But that being said, when our troops do go to war, I want them to have the best of the best. I'd like to go over now to Venezuela because it raised a very intriguing possibility. And that was of Russian military help to counter the U.S. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Wednesday raised the possibility of getting military support from Russia to boost its defensive capabilities after President Donald Trump threatened to use force against the South American nation. And he was speaking at an energy forum in Moscow, and Maduro said that his administration will discuss increased military cooperation with the Russian government during his visit this week. I am sure, even if we do not ask, we will be given even more support to boost Venezuela's defense capability and sovereignty, Maduro said. A war with Russia over Venezuela's oil reserves? I only have 3 observations on that. Please, Lord, no.
Has Trump even come out with a reason why we're supposed to go to war in Venezuela now? Venezuela, to the best of my knowledge, has not attacked us.
No.
All they've done is sell their oil for the yuan instead of the dollar.
And that's ticked.
Apparently, that is it.
Yeah, you know, and kind of a very interesting approach that Maduro is taking to ensure that he is able to stay in office and not get hit with regime change.
Well, you know, I mean, it certainly worked in Syria. You know, the Russian military have proven to be very cost effective. And again, I think one of the worst mistakes that Trump made was sending in those cruise missiles to that Syrian air base because most of them missed the target. And that's not a message you want to send to the rest of the world about the quality of our weapons.
Nope, not at all.
We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Claire, take it away.
This again from antiwar.com. Apparently, slain U.S. troops were told that the Niger area was low risk. U.S. training operations in Niger took a turn for the deadly on Wednesday when 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and 2 others wounded in an ambush by unspecified enemies near the Niger-Mali border. These are the first U.S. combat deaths recorded in Niger, with another U.S. soldier killed in a vehicle accident earlier this year. The incident is raising a lot of questions, Mike, because U.S. commanders have been telling everyone involved that the patrols were low risk and that there was very little hostile activity in the area.
Well, that's what you're going to tell the troops to send them on out there. I didn't even know why we're in Niger. I mean,
I'm going to point that out.
All right, good.
These troops were lied to about the risk factor of their deployment here, and their COs should have been much more forthright with them about the real dangers they were facing. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm more and more seeing national armies as the hired guns of major corporations colluding with the governments, which are their willing errand boys, in order to expropriate foreign natural resources to which they have no real moral right, and make sure that those resources are only sold in specific currencies.
Well, this gets back to Major General Smedley Butler and his comment that war is a racket.
Yeah. And if you take a look at Index Mundi, which is a very, well, it's a CIA-sponsored weblog, you will see that there is gold in Niger, there's uranium, all sorts of things that are in very, very deep demand that the U.S. would like to have more of. So this is what we're doing in Niger, trying to make sure that the Nigerian government is Western and U.S.-centric, and that whatever is being mined and expropriated is only sold in U.S. dollars.
Well, this is another reason why China is now establishing a presence on the African continent, because they're kind of sick and tired of the United States trying to run the entire planet when it can't even do a decent job running its own country.
Yeah. I know that you have talked about the issue of U.S. decertification of the P5+1.
Yes.
But there are a few things I'd like to mention about that.
Yes.
To blame Iran for the instability in the Middle East, which is the fault, generally, of the occupied, unhinged, surveilled states of America. And right now, what I'm seeing, Mike, it's generally the U.S. which is responsible for the arc of instability, not to mention insanity in the Middle East, moving westward toward Russia and eastward toward China and Asia. And this behavior appears to most sane observers to typify the behavior as that of the head of an empire, which is on the desperate, utter brink of collapse.
Well, like I said earlier in the show, stop listening to what the government says and watch what the government is doing, and it quickly becomes obvious who the real aggressor is in all of these wars.
And as you said, I mean, the doing of this will make all the world's leaders say, we can't deal with the United States because they're always going to break their promises. And I also have to ask, if I could get in front of him, which I doubt I can, Kelly would probably push me out the door, what country's national interests are injured by the U.S. continuing to comply with the deal? And we need to take a look at his key advisors, that unholy triumvirate of president whispers consisting of Kelly, Mattis, and McMasters, who seem to believe that the only solutions to U.S. geopolitical issues are more wars and wars only. But there is a fourth in this game, and this one is the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And I feel very strongly compelled to strongly caution President Trump that although Netanyahu and Tel Aviv have cheerled for regime change in Tehran for decades, they fully expect that the outcome will be purchased primarily at the cost of American blood and American money. And when it comes to Iran, there's also that 6,000-pound gorilla in the living room snoozing on the Bissendorfer Grand on the issue of an attack against Iran. The name of that gorilla is Russia. Now, Russia's military and civilian politicians have sworn consistently that should Iran be attacked, Russia will come to its aid. right now, this country is broke. Its military does not have the weaponry, the troop strength, the manufacturing, or the money to successfully engage militarily with the Russians in Iran. And, I think he's going to go ahead with the decertification.
Yep.
I think it's a terrible move to make because it's going to be the trigger that will pull all of these other issues into play. Iran continuing then with its nuclear weapons program, and any kind of attack will be met fiercely by the Iranian military, which is, they're no slouches, and probably assisted by the Russians.
Well, even if Congress refuses to rescind the deal, because Trump basically dumped it on them.
Right.
Right. I'm going to decertify, but we're leaving it up to Congress as to what they're going to do. Even if Congress does nothing, the political damage to the U.S. government is already done. And the message is very, very clear. Anybody who surrenders any weapons in exchange for U.S. promises is an idiot and shouldn't be running a country.
Yeah, I agree. We had kind of a Pyrrhic victory in the last week, in that the UN blacklisted the Saudi coalition for killing children in Yemen. And in keeping with a draft copy of the report leaked early this week, the annual UN blacklist for harming children in armed conflict has named the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, of which the U.S. is a major player, I might add, as a major violator of the rights of children, noting that their war efforts have killed or injured 683 Yemeni children in 2016 and bombing dozens of schools and hospitals. The report confirmed that Saudi actions objectively led to 683 child casualties. I think that number is way low.
I agree.
And 38 verified incidents. They listed Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Shiite Houthi movement as well, although they had much lower casualty counts. Saudi Arabia invaded Yemen in early 2015 with a coalition that includes Egypt, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, Jordan, Senegal, Sudan, and the U.S. The U.S. involvement has included targeting support for Saudi warplanes, in-air refueling for Saudi bombers, and naval participation in the blockade of Yemen. And this happened last year, but what the Saudis did was threaten to withdraw funding to the UN, and these actions simply melted away. I don't think it's going to do a thing about the Saudi actions in Yemen. And the U.S. participation in these activities makes the U.S. government complicit in war crimes in Yemen. How do you like being a citizen of a country committing war crimes in the Middle East with impunity? I don't. Thank you very much.
Well, this may be part of the reason why Saudi Arabia is starting to pull away from the West and cozy up with Russia. And you need to understand that the reason the U.S. sent this coalition, which is a way of avoiding personal responsibility and blame, the U.S. had a successful intervention in Yemen several years ago. And it was applauded. We successfully intervened. We put in a government that we want. But the people of Yemen didn't want that puppet regime, so they kicked them out. And so the U.S. sent in Saudi Arabia to slap the Yemenite people around and say, look, when we give you a new government, you will love that new government. And the people of Yemen are saying, no, we're not. And so the puppet government, the so-called internationally recognized government, last I heard they were holding meetings on this abandoned car carrier in the port.
Yeah.
And the people of Yemen are just trying to take their country back, just like the people of Syria. And I'm sure they're emboldened by events in Syria.
Yeah. And the one thing that people need to remember, in the last election in Yemen, there was only one candidate on the ballot, that of Mansour al-Hadi.
Yes.
I mean, democracy in action? Come on, folks. This is pretty awful.
It's democracy mania. Not really democracy, but an incredible simulation.
Right, right. Let's bob over to Israel. And Netanyahu has said Israel will not accept a Palestinian unity deal. And he insisted that any Palestinian unity would necessarily come at the expense of Israel's existence, and so he would not allow it. Other top Israeli officials also condemned the reconciliation talk, suggesting that they amounted to the Abbas government cozying up to a murderous terrorist organization. Now, this is just another stalling tactic to prevent meaningful peace negotiations from happening, which is why Netanyahu is refusing talks yet again.
Yes, and that's been the pattern all along. I mean, back when Yasser Arafat had the PLO, Israel actually covertly started Hamas, and they did it for precisely the reason of saying, look, we don't know who we should be talking to, therefore we're not going to talk to anybody. Then Arafat was assassinated and the PLO collapsed, and all of a sudden Hamas found itself basically the government of Palestine, and so Israel supports Abbas and his group, and saying, once again, we don't know who to talk to, therefore we're not going to talk to anybody. And this is just the way Israel has been playing the game. Now, the good news is pressure is building on Netanyahu. He's being interviewed over apparently 2 more abuse of power charges, and it's looking more and more like there are people inside the government of Israel who think he's had that job way too long.
And what was ironic to me was he characterized Fatah as a murderous terrorist organization. And I thought for a second he was talking about the IDF and its slow-motion genocide against Palestinian children. And I was able to look in DuckDuckGo, I think, and there were about 20 incidents of the IDF shooting Palestinian children dead.
28 in the last 3 months.
And now, I'm going to be honest. It's not that there haven't been atrocities from the Palestinian side. But that being said, when Prime Minister Netanyahu characterizes any group as murderous, he may well want to think before he makes such an accusation as a blowback comparison to what the IDF has done will practically be inevitable.
There's a website you all ought to visit. It's called ifamericans.onlyknew.org. And it basically, it's a very objective, honest telling of who is doing what to who in Israel and Palestine, and how much it's costing you, the American taxpayer. And it is insanely one-sided. Yes, there are Palestinians who are fighting back, who are trying to bring an end to this, but the bias is overwhelmingly on Israel's side when it comes to just keeping track of all the shootings and the beatings and the torture and the imprisonment. There really is no comparison between the two. So for Netanyahu to accuse the Palestinians of being a terrorist state, he does. That's a case of the pot calling the kettle black.
Right. And when children and they do jail children, and sometimes indefinitely, and when children sign confessions, the confessions are in Hebrew, a language those kids don't understand at all. They speak Arabic. And, there is the lovely little thing of Israel having sealed off West Bank and Gaza as Sukkot begins. There's an 11-day border closure hitting some of the 4 million Palestinians as week-long Jewish holiday commences. And they've sealed it off for 11 days. At midnight on Tuesday, all crossings to West Bank and Gaza Strip were closed off to some 4 million Palestinians in the territories. Now, many of these people affected hold Israeli work permits and cross to go to their jobs daily. Banned from entering Israel, they now stand to lose their livelihood for the next 10 days. And, I mean, the people they work for may not hire them back. That's pretty awful. And it is said that Israeli soldiers roam around settlement construction sites in the West Bank, and if they see anyone there, they immediately send people back to their villages. Now, Mike, could someone please remind me again how Israel is allegedly the only democracy in the Middle East?
No, it's an apartheid state. I mean, the license plates prove it. The license plates, there are different colors for Jews versus everybody else. And if you have the right license plate on your car, you're waved through all the crossings and the checks, and you're just allowed to go on your way. If you have the other license plates, you'll be stopped, searched, harassed. That's apartheid when you do that on the basis of religion or ethnicity.
It is, and it's sort of like the yellow badges that Jews had to wear in Denmark during World War II.
Well, that gets really blown up, by the Holocaust industry. But you need to remember that the Nazis had all different kinds of badges people had to wear. And actually what was mandated for the Jews was a yellow triangle. Most of these badges were just triangles, and the gays got the pink ones, and gypsies got, I forget what the other, but the Jewish ones would take two of those little triangles and make the little Star of David for themselves as a sign of religious pride, which I think is a very good thing to do. But it wasn't just the Jews that were being tagged with these identifiers. It was the gays, mentally ill, gypsies, former criminals, and it was a very complex system.
Yeah. I'd like to bop over to Saudi Arabia, because apparently Saudi Arabia and Russia have signed deals, very intense deals, and they're going to buy Russia's top plane killer, the S-400. And so, as you said, it looks like Saudi Arabia may be pivoting to join Turkey, which is also buying the vaunted S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. And the announcement carried extra diplomatic weight as Saudi King Salman was visiting Russia when the Saudis made the announcement. And all of a sudden, the NATO guys and the Europe guys getting their clothing in a twist, and apparently retired Admiral James Stavridis called the sale a step backwards in U.S. foreign policy and defense policy. And since World War II, when President Roosevelt agreed with King Faisal that we would guarantee Saudi sovereignty in return for access to their oil, the kingdom has been one of our closest allies. And, of course, they had to throw in notwithstanding the 9/11 attacks led by Saudi citizens. So, retired Admiral James, a word, please. It is very simple. The Russian weapon systems work as advertised by the incredible performance they've given in Syria. Right now, the American weaponry system is in a state of utter shambles, courtesy of lousy engineering and huge cost overruns at the public's expense, which the U.S. military and federal government simply allow to continue.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break here for a commercial. We'll be back with our last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And last segment of our program on this Pauhana Friday. And Claire, you got another story for us.
Yes. This comes to us courtesy of the Wall Street Jerks. Putin strikes again. Russian hackers reportedly stole NSA data on cyber defense.
You mean the NSA can't protect its own computers?
What can I tell you?
Let's all break in and make copies of all that pornography they've stolen from the hard drives of the American people.
Yes. Looks like the Russian President Vladimir Putin is back at it. The Wall Street Jerks reported Thursday that hackers working for the Russian government have stolen data describing how U.S. intelligence agencies infiltrate foreign computer networks and how they defend against cyber attacks.
Obviously, that defensive system doesn't work, right? If we believe this story?
Yeah, the data was stolen after a National Security Agency contractor removed the highly classified material and put it on his home computer, according to the Wall Street Jerk's anonymous source.
Well, then it wasn't Putin in Russia, it was this contractor.
Yeah. News of the hack, which hadn't been exposed previously, explains the federal government's abrupt crackdown on Moscow-based security firms Kaspersky Labs. As the Wall Street Jerk explained, the contractor may have been targeted after hackers identified the files, thanks to the contractor's use of a popular antivirus software created by Kaspersky. Okay. Now, Mike, no sourcing? I have to ask, since when did the Wall Street Jerk get so completely sloppy in their alleged reporting?
Okay. Now, first of all, how did the hackers use Kaspersky to identify the files?
It makes no sense.
It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And again, they're blaming Russia for this, but the blame for this is this contractor who basically put sensitive material like that on their home computer. And if that material was in fact classified, and it should have been, that's a Title 18 felony violation.
Yeah, that's jail time.
That guy should be going to jail.
You know, and I have to ask, is the major prerequisite necessary for working for the NSA complete and abysmal technological stupidity? And
they don't want smart people working for the NSA anymore. They may wake up the way Snowden did, and then they'll really be in a fix. So the NSA is apparently hiring morons. But again, this is just more gratuitous Russia bashing.
More demonization.
They're trying to sell you the idea that Russia is bad and Russia is evil. And if you're my age, we've seen this all before back in the 1950s and the 1960s.
Not new.
You know, every day, Russia's going to attack, Russia's going to do this, Russia's Russia's going to do that. And it never happened.
Yeah, and so my observation to the Wall Street jerk is either source and do what is supposed to be your job, or shut the flip up. This is simply more anonymous demonization of Russia, which we all understand is part of a prelude to a shooting war against it. And to its editor-in-chief, Gerard Baker, a word please. Sir, whatever compensation you are getting overtly or covertly from elements of the deep state in this country, desperate to see this country at war with Russia and China to cut off the rise of the ruble and yuan in international trade, it cannot possibly be enough.
Oh, well, I imagine the deep state is very generous for those who serve its agenda, and this guy probably has a portfolio full of military-industrial complex stocks.
Yeah.
And everybody who's got their money invested with war, they're going to push for war any way they can. There's the music. Time for us to get on out of here. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of stuff to share with you. Have a really good weekend. We'll be back Monday, and Aloha America.